You know, it's kind of disappointing not to have Meryl and her doing
Yeah.
her funny thing at the beginning of our broadcast.
Yeah.
Uh, Alas and alack. Today, Wonder. Hurrah for Wonder. Uh, Thoughts?
Who wants to go first?
I
Tessa?
liked it.
You liked it?
I liked it. I liked having an easy read, and it was well written, and I liked it. I don't have many thoughts though.
Okay.
Okay. I liked it too. I thought it was good. I liked that we got to see the perspectives of different narrators. Even though that meant we didn't really get to go too deep on any one person. It definitely added something different than if the story had just been August telling it. And I felt like it had a lot of realism to it, in terms of August describing how people would react to him or pretend like they weren't staring at him, or and I think particularly for a middle grade book, that's not something that's generally discussed, and it's a good um, opportunity for discussion.
I actually liked it as well. This is one of the books that we use for our book of the month club at school. So I actually have an opportunity every other year in October to talk to a bunch of kids about the book. So that's kind of fun.
That's great.
I guess since I work with middle grade readers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I'm really curious, and there are a couple of like companion books that have been released that I haven't read yet, but perspectives of some of the characters that we didn't hear from, like Julian.
Right.
And I kind of wonder how that would change the story if we'd heard his perspective, particularly like surrounding his interaction with Jack during Halloween.
Well, I
I'm
read the
sorry, this is
Julian
going to Jack.
chapter.
Oh,
Oh, did you?
Yeah, and I forget, actually, I think it was just told pretty much after the story, um, that I can remember. It was mostly just Julian after he left school, and it was a little bit too idealistic because he completely changed. His grandmother told him a story about how she became appreciative of a kid who had polio, and he was like, "Oh, I'm like, I was so, like mean, and I shouldn't have," and like he just completely
Oh,
changed, and it was like, that would not have happened.
yeah. Huh.
It's interesting. I think it's really. I think middle schoolers who treat other people badly, it's really hard for them to change. Um, I don't know why that is. Maybe they have. Hey, if you're gonna sit down, sit down.
Well, young people don't have fully developed brains, so they don't have the mentality or the like brain power to develop like a like a an adult.
Okay.
It's interesting to hear that that's the direction she went in for the Julian chapter, because I was thinking it was going to be more of trying to have us have sympathy for him, like.
Yeah, she like I do remember a little bit more of it. He like had nightmares about like scary movies that he watched, like monster movies, and so that's why like his why he treated the
August.
kid
Yeah.
yeah August wrong.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's what I mean, is that I feel like that's a lot of times when authors dive into the bad guy's perspective, it's like, oh, well, now I understand why he was so mean.
They tend to create,
like, wait,
yeah,
no, what?
sympathetic. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have sympathy for the kid who had no sympathy for anybody else.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just want a bad guy, but I mean
Yeah.
they're teenagers.
Realistically, he would have just been mean just because. Like,
Not necessarily. I mean, a lot of times when kids are mean to each other, there is something else going on.
Right.
I mean, not all the time, but a lot of the times there's something else going on. And it's more about the kid who is doing the picking than the kid who is being picked on.
Right.
Like, he just happened to be a target of that particular aggression, which is unfortunate, and it sucks, like, royally.
Yeah. And I feel like the fact that she chose not to dive into his perspective narrative was a way of saying, like, it, even if it's just about him and what happened to him, like, it really doesn't matter because it's still wrong the way that he did August. And I think that that's an important message.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, you can have plenty of stuff, but that doesn't give you an excuse to treat other people badly.
Right, exactly.
Which is a hard thing to get through to middle school students sometimes, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are questions in the chat. They were from, where was this? A library in Santa Monica did a citywide read thing, and then had discussion questions for that citywide read, which is kind of neat.
Yep.
I was thinking about question 1 before, like, earlier today. Like, I liked how it switched narratives, kept it fresh.
Oh, so for anybody who goes back and watches this later, question 1 says, because we get actually people who watch it later. In Wonder, we hear from narrators other than Augie. What do you think about the storytelling structure? How do you think it contributes to the scope and tone of the novel? Honestly, I think it keeps it from being too whiny.
Yeah.
Because okay, August is 10. He's entering into a new environment, one that is scary, and I feel like his parents have babied him quite a bit.
Yeah.
So a lot of his narrative, or not a lot of, but some of his narrative gets pretty whiny, and I'm just like, I'm really glad that it's not the entire book, because I think I would get annoyed and put it down.
Yeah. And that was actually the one thing that I didn't like so much about the book, is that I don't feel like he ever really matured emotionally in that way. Like, even by the end of the book, he was still asking his mom to, like, make him special chocolate milk and grilled cheese, and, like, I never felt like he came to the realization that, like, oh wait, my parents are, like, babying me and taking care of me, and maybe I need to, like, be more of a, I don't know, independent person.
Maybe the 10-year-olds, that's like what being a 10-year-old is like. Especially for a boy, like, who hasn't gone through puberty yet.
Yeah. I just felt like the author made a choice, especially with his sister's narrative, to specifically draw attention to how emotionally immature he was. And then that never changed, as far as I could see.
I think it might have been more about his bravery entering into.
I was just gonna say that.
Because
it's definitely about him building courage.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at least he's not completely static.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I agree.
Because that would have made me angry as a reader too.
Yeah. I thought that the author really took pains to avoid having the book be just, like, inspiration porn, where, like, oh, here's this guy and he's telling us a story about his life and how he stares at him and how hard it is, and we're just supposed to come away with having more sympathy for those people and or feeling that they're so brave for living their life. And, like, that's the whole moral of the story. And so giving that alternate perspective brought it beyond that message.
But I think she also does a good job of with the multiple perspectives, letting us see the process of some of the characters and how they befriend Augie.
Exactly.
Like Summer sitting with him because she feels sorry for him, which happens, and then realizing that actually this is a neat kid, and I'm glad that I felt sorry for him at the beginning because now I'm friends with this really cool guy.
Right.
I mean, and I think Jack's process was very similar, except he had where I think Summer didn't feel like she cared about her friends and her other friends and how they felt about it. Jack was still trying to save face, with the other popular boys, which also seemed really realistic to me. Right. So many students who, when they interact like with certain people, are one way, and then when they interact with other people, are a different way, and when they interact with me, are like a third person. It's like, I don't know, maybe adolescents have multiple personalities.
Well, that saying how like you're who you are to yourself and like to other people, like you're a different person. You're like who you think you are, who other people think you are, and who you really are. Like you act differently around different people. I think that's just being human.
Yeah. I think it's beneficial to show that progression, especially with Summer, because I think sometimes people are like, oh, well, I don't want to stay with this person just because I feel sorry for them. Like, that's not fair. But it's like, maybe you stay with them and you get to know them, and maybe they turn out to be a terrible person, and then you're like, okay, now I don't want to hang out with them anymore. Cool. And then you're like, okay, now I made a friend. And you don't have to have, like, these pure intentions when you're, first sitting down to have lunch with someone or whatever.
It's like all those dating movies from the 90s.
Like what?
You know how the guy goes up to the girl because he made a bet,
Yeah.
and then finds out that the girl's actually pretty cool.
Right.
Very 90s.
I think we should discuss question 7 because I saw a giant rant about this on Goodreads.
Okay. So 7 says the first precept Augie learns is Wayne Dyer's: when given the choice between right or being kind, choose kind. Why do you suppose there's such a great human need to be right?
So, not so much the part about being right, but the precept that they learn and the whole like movement about choose kind that this book spawned. Somebody was ranting that essentially this means like you should always have like look down on people who have disabilities with sympathy and kindness, and that this is teaching people to not see people for who they really are, but to like be the I don't know what I'm trying to say. Like feel like you're the savior who is like the one person who's the kind soul to this disabled person. And,
be a hero.
And that's how they
kind man.
I don't know that that's necessarily what the book was going for, but I thought that was an interesting interpretation.
But also, isn't when would being rude be the right thing? Like the opposite of kind is rude.
Yeah.
And they're talking about picking being kind over picking being right. So why would you like, or maybe it's like you think you're right, so you like are rude when you think you're right, even though you might be wrong. So that
Well, I think maybe
people
it's
are rude.
talking about like telling white lies. You know, like someone's like, "Oh, do you think I'm ugly?" And like maybe you think that they're ugly, but you're gonna choose to be kind and say like, "No, you're not ugly." And I feel like that's maybe what it's getting at.
Um, hmm.
Hmm.
No, I'm thinking about this whole savior thing because there was a conversation that I had in one of my graduate courses about Patricia McCormick's Soul, where when there are people who are marginalized for whatever reason, there's got to be like somebody who comes in and saves them, and it's not so much about like it's like saying that these people who are marginalized lack the ability to save themselves. Um, which
Right.
is not necessarily the case. And I don't really feel like minus the situation in the woods, was Augie really saved from anything or anyone or something? Um,
Well, except that was really the climax of the novel.
yeah. He wouldn't have I don't think he would have been able to save himself. I
Right.
mean I think that was more about the journey of those boys than it was
Yeah,
about Augie.
it was.
Yeah.
Um, because I mean, what if they had not been there? What would have happened? He would have gotten pummeled.
Yeah.
Just because I mean, it says in the beginning that he's small for his age. So you're a fifth grader who was small for his age up against a couple of seventh graders, and seventh graders are actually freaking huge. A lot of them. Um, so that I really think that was more about the boys' journey than it was about Augie's. But then Augie has this sense of belonging because the people who stood behind someone who picked on him have, changed. Will you stop?
I
Right.
sent my cat outside.
Oh, it's this is Webster, and he does what he wants. But
So
he won't
that,
sit.
I guess then the question, and this is what this reviewer was getting at, is like, is the message of the book then that people who are different or weak like need us to stand up for them and take care of them? Is that what we should get out of this?
Mm.
Yeah.
I thought it was more about acceptance. Like, um, it wasn't the point wasn't that Augie was saved, like that they were his savior. It was that they accepted him for like and like gave him worth to like them wanting to stand up for him. So it was more about acceptance, in my opinion.
Yeah. So did he need someone else to give him worth?
Well, it wasn't like maybe yes, but I mean like just it wasn't about him like becoming worthy. It was about them seeing him as worthy of friendship.
Yeah. Well, I
Which
thought
again makes it more about their journey than it does about
Yeah.
his own.
yeah.
Because I think
That,
without the scene like in the woods, something else would have happened that he would have earned their acceptance.
You're
I
gonna
don't
say
know
something,
what,
Jessica?
but like she would have come up with something else.
huh. I don't know. I mean, I don't know that that always happens.
Yeah.
And I guess I guess the message of the book really is for people who are not like August, but who go to school with them.
Yeah.
And it's like, are you going to treat this person like they are part of your crowd, your school? Are you going to stand up for them? Or are you going to just whisper about them and make fun of them? And I think that's fair. I mean, I think you can have that message without it being, oh, you need to feel sorry for this person. So maybe that's what the choose kind is about, not pitying someone, but accepting them as someone equivalent to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike, who was it, Julian's mother, who was trying to tell Tushman that the school is not it's not an inclusion school.
Right, yeah.
Oh, and she drove me crazy.
Yeah.
Because, well, one, he didn't require special services.
Right.
And two, she sets up students who have disabilities as less than.
Right.
Regardless of the disability, and it drives me crazy because, I mean, from my perspective as a teacher, they're kids. They're all kids, and they all deserve an education.
Right.
And you don't know. If you don't know the kid, how can you make a judgment?
Yeah.
I mean, some kids who are not, who don't require special services, are complete turds, and some aren't, and some who require special services are turds, and some aren't. But they have things, and those things affect them being turds. Julian's thing was his mother.
Yeah.
I think for the purposes of this novel, it was important to include that conversation so that we could realize that the school wasn't changing its standards or making any sort of
Exceptions
exactly for August, that he really was like the same as the rest of them. He just looked different.
Yeah, and the reason they had the interview at his house, because they didn't want to tell him that he was being enrolled into school before, because he would have refused to do it.
Well, and part of it too was so he'd taken a test, and that was the admissions test, and that was a year prior, and they'd only found out a month before the story starts that he actually got in. So they didn't want to start something unnecessarily, which he was upset about, suggesting that he wouldn't have been able to handle it, or that parents suggesting that he might not have been able to handle it at that age, like he did not throw a temper tantrum at the beginning of the novel.
Yeah.
So the question that I asked of the students with whom we talk about this book is, why is it so hard to choose kind? Or is it hard to choose kind?
Yeah. I think I think a lot of it, especially as we see in the context of the novel, is about social stigma. I mean, I think that has to do with Summer's decision that she's able to put aside that social stigma. Jack has a harder time with that, and Julian definitely relies on being popular, I think, for his identity. So there's a lot of that.
And interestingly, I don't think his popularity is quite as solid as he thinks it is.
Sure.
Uh, well, I mean, we see Jack talking to his mother before the story even starts, or before school starts,
Yeah.
um, about Julian and how he's a jerk. And by the end of the novel, he's kind of like the cheese that stands alone. Um, so I think he's the really he's the only one of those characters in the forefront who is static.
Yeah.
Um, but he starts static with all of these friends and then ends static alone.
Right.
I wonder if that has some sort of influence on the change that we see in his, or that Pam saw in his chapter.
Mm. Yeah. That's true.
Because so then it's still social stigma that like initiates that change along with the story from his grandma, because if that popularity is so important to him and he loses that social standing,
Right.
uh, then he may be more apt for change,
Yeah.
or
That's
apt to change.
right. It's interesting.
So, mm. Any of these other questions strike your fancy? We kind of talked about the one about Julian already.
Yeah.
How would the story be different if it was set in a public school? Well, most public schools are inclusion schools, so Julian's mother wouldn't have been able to um, complain. Maybe she would have wanted him to be put into special ed, but well, yeah, that maybe that would have been a difference in the story.
Yeah, I don't know that this would have changed that much. I mean, I went to a public school and I didn't see the interactions or the things that went on the school as that different. I mean, I think it really just came down to like the whole admissions process and him being
Yeah.
admitted at the same level as everyone else. That was really the only part I thought that was relevant about it being private.
Um, well, like in the book, Julian kind of just disappears. In his chapter, like there's a big fuss about tuition and stuff like that because he leaves the school and they want their tuition back, and so that wouldn't have happened if it was a public school.
Oh, so he leaves before the year is over.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think I understood that. I remember it said, he's going to be leaving, or he's not going to be returning, but I assumed that meant the following year and not like next week.
Yeah. I think he was actually suspended, and then I can't remember, and then they decided not to, like, but he could have been expelled, I forget.
Huh.
Because of the notes, he got in trouble because of the notes that he put in Jack's and August's locker.
Okay. And that comes up uh, in the conversation between Tushman and August. Or I think it was Tushman and August. Yeah. And August is like, "How did you know all of this stuff?" Like, dude, we see everything.
Oh.
It's like, don't you know we've got eyes in the backs of our heads? I explain that one to my students sometimes. It's like, guys, it's not because I'll holler at them for something and I'm not looking at them. It's not that I have eyes in the back of my head. It's that my ears work and you forget. Because they're not exactly quiet.
They're being quiet.
It's funny. No, it's one of those things I've realized since I started teaching. Because my mother used to say that she had eyes in the back of her head. And, that's how she knew everything that was going on. No, just use your ears.
Hearing.
Hmm. Yeah. How do I know you're eating? I can hear it. Yeah. It's good times. So this is like English teacher confessional or something. Telling all of my secrets
Uh-huh.
on the internet. That's okay. Um,
I thought it was weird that their middle school started in 5th grade.
that happens in some places.
I didn't know that. And that they have a graduation ceremony for every grade.
Yeah, they're graduating, but they're
Yeah.
going to the same school.
Yeah. My teaching license from Indiana is actually it's a secondary license and it's 512.
Okay.
So in Indiana, actually out here in New Mexico too, I could teach 5th grade.
Oh, okay.
And some places have 5th grades that rotate like 6th grade and on classes too. Some schools have 6th grade that looks like elementary school. So
Yeah.
I guess that element of it was not quite as much of a surprise
Yeah.
for me.
I only know of middle schools that start at 6th grade and junior highs that start at 7th grade, but I hadn't encountered any that started at 5th. But yeah, with the graduation ceremony, that was worst to me.
Oh man, I have feelings about graduation ceremonies before the end of high school.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have feelings.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll just gonna leave it there because I can rant.
Yeah, sure. I would listen.
But it seems like it was like an awards ceremony kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
One of my friends who read the book said that she was upset at the end. She didn't think that Augie should have gotten that Courage Award.
Right.
She thinks that Summer should have gotten it. Because Summer showed courage in a way that Augie didn't. So like, yeah, it took courage to come to school when you'd never been to school before, but she went against the whole social stigma thing and sat with him and became his friend to begin with. Dude.
Yeah.
Will you just sit down? Because you're just gonna keep bothering me. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down. We're all watching me deal with the cat.
I thought it was. I went back and forth about that, and I thought that it was fairly realistic that the school would give August a Courage Award because that tends to be the way people approach that sort of thing. And I thought that it gave an opportunity for August to be like, I didn't really do anything to deserve this. I just kind of want to be an ordinary kid.
Sorry. Okay. He's sleeping. Is there anything else on here that you guys want to talk about?
No, pretty good.
Oh, that was really neat. They had. Sorry, so I scrolled down a little bit past the questions, and they had a number of different discussions at a bunch of different times.
That's cool.
Yeah, and some of them were at libraries, some of them were at restaurants, some of them were specifically like family oriented. There was one that was in Spanish.
One for the bonus book, The Bluest Eye.
Yeah, that's cool.
Oh wait, yeah, there's books discussions and then read events. So.
Oh, yeah.
Very cool. Okay, so I think this library is neat. My library doesn't do things like this. Oh wow, they even did an after-in with the author.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, so you guys ready to call it?
Yeah.
All right, next month is Ready Player One. Or this month, Ready Player One. Will Wheaton! Yay! Sorry, I'm a nerd. Did you hear that going to be a movie
Yeah.
directed by Steven Spielberg?
Wow.
So we can add that to the list of things that we talk about.
Yeah.
In what, May? The
Yeah.
beginning of May, end of April, beginning of May. All right, I'm gonna shut it down. Yay!